This is Audiogyan, and I am your host, Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world.
Welcome to Audiogyan. We are recording this series, Where Are the Designers? It's a 12-part series featuring few of the top influential design leaders in India, talking about the process of hiring, challenges in finding and retaining talent, and some tips for young designers to make a cut. So I'm happy and proud to announce my co-host for this series, Abhinit Tiwari. Hey Abhinit, what's up?
Hey Kedar, all good. How's it going there?
Yeah, good. So we are pretty much close to the end of the season or end of the series. And today we have Aditi Kulkarni with us on Audiogyan. She's a UX manager at Shopify, previously at Indeed, Referral Candy, Postman, and more. Formerly trained in print as graphic designer, she switched to web design in early 2005 and has been hiring, mentoring, and in fact regularly sharing her learnings at various design events and conferences. So yeah, pretty excited. So welcome Aditi to Audiogyan, and yeah, looking forward to hear your thoughts about Where Are the Designers?
Hi Kedar, and thanks so much, and happy to be here, and happy to talk to both of you, Kedar and Abhinit.
Cool, great. So this series, we have introduced like a rapid fire round, which is sort of like some fun type questions before, and as we can call it like a warm up round before we get to Where Are the Designers? Yeah. So Aditi, we'll start with the rapid fire round.
Oh, okay.
So first question is, what do you look in a candidate, attitude or aptitude?
Attitude.
Okay. Best way to take notes because you are from print, pen and paper, or keyboard and iPad and screen?
That's a difficult question. I would say a mix of both, or it depends. Sometimes I do prefer pen and paper, but sometimes an iPad is very handy. So
Cool. Your favorite interview question?
My favorite interview question is, can you give me an example of a conflict you've had with a product manager or engineer, and how did you resolve it?
Awesome. What's more fun, print or web?
Web.
Okay. Did you ever think of going back to print? Because
Never.
All right. We'll come to that part again. Worst part of print design?
I think it never sat well with me, to be very honest. I was never able to, the moment I graduated, I was never really able to become a proper print designer. It never happened. I didn't like book design, magazine design, or any of those things. And I immediately, I think 2 projects in, I told my boss I want to do website design. So I very early switched, I would say, my first job. So nice. Luckily, I was working in a design studio and it was easy to just switch to something else. So
okay. And what is the worst part of digital design?
The worst part, I guess, now, like today, there are a lot of, I guess I would say there are a lot of ethical concerns. Like when you build things, you have to think about how things would be misused. I think in the early days, we never really thought about it. Everyone was very optimistic when the iPhone came out and we were making iPhone apps and it was all very exciting. But today, suddenly, tech does have a bit of a bad name. And so suddenly you're a bit aware of that, and you're aware that you could be contributing to some of that. And so I think that is definitely not so great part of digital design.
Cool. यार इसके ऊपर भी एक सीरीज कर सकते हैं, बट हाँ ठीक है later. Best book or podcast or recent article that you read in design?
In design, not much, to be honest. I don't read a lot of design books.
Okay, then anything else? Yeah, that's great.
I'm actually reading a book about this doctor who is the cause of anti-vaxxer propaganda. It's very interesting. Like, this British doctor decided that he wanted to come up with this whole concept that vaccinations can cause problems. And then that sort of thinking spread all over the world. And now all of us are suffering because of it, but I think it's very interesting. It's very interesting, almost like a history and political drama of how that propaganda spread and how people got on board and various institutions got interested in this story and narrative, and then how that narrative spread over the years. It started decades ago, but it's just built steam over the years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Toughest thing that you did as a design manager?
I think that's like every day. I think being a design manager is really hard. I feel like I'm still learning, and I face challenges almost every day or every week of my job. So, yeah.
Cool. And what makes like a great designer according to you in one word?
I think sincerity.
Okay. And one thing you hate about design?
I don't hate anything about design.
Awesome. That's the rapid fire round. Cool. You want to start with the first one?
So, Aditi, I think you touched on this a little, but when you said that, when you graduated, you didn't really get a job in print. Could you take us back to that time when you were starting your career? Why, or talk a little bit more about why you made the switch from print to...
Sure. So I did my graphic design at NID, and it was awesome, fun for 4-5 years to study design in a design school. But then when you graduate and you go out into the real world and you try to practice as a graphic designer, it's a completely different universe. And I think that's where you get a reality check that maybe this is not what I want to do. So I personally love the craft of logo design and print design. And I like to do my own style of work, right? Like if you see the Postman logo is very geometric. And somebody like me is definitely not going to survive in the graphic design industry, because I would make logos and, clients would want a certain particular, style depending on their brand. And that's fair. But I didn't want to do it. I was like, this doesn't sound fun to me. So I was a young designer and I just wanted to do cool projects. Sure. And I saw that there was other teams doing web design projects. And I was like, why can't I do that? And it wasn't very popular. Like people were like, sure, you want to do that, do that. I was like, cool. And it was quite easy for me to just switch to another project and just start doing web design. And once I started doing it, I really loved it. And I was like, okay, this is definitely what I want to do. And that got me started into digital. So in my first job itself, I never did any like major print projects. Like I quickly switched. I still have that love for branding and, print, but in a very almost like I would say an arts and craft like perspective, and not in terms of an industry designer who would like, create all these beautiful images in different styles, depending on the client. Like, I think it's a completely different ask from what we were doing in school.
Sure.
So
yeah, I hear that from a lot of designers actually, how different industry can be to, the environment that you have in the college.
Yeah. And there were these clients like CEOs and stuff who were like, oh, I want the logo to be, some other color. And I was just like, excuse me, like, no, like, I'm not going to change the color. But you kind of had to, right? Because they are the client. So I found that really frustrating. And I was like, I'm only going to do logos for like people who actually, anyway, I started to think that it doesn't make any sense to do this. And in terms of digital, I think I'm more service oriented, and I can like figure it out and be like, okay, let's come up with the best website based on your needs. And then that was a better match for me.
Yeah, it's much easier with software. There's more room to be rational in arguments and you can ask more whys, whereas,
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? And then it's much better than somebody saying, okay, I'm going to ask my dad which logo is better. And you're like, excuse me, like, this is so bad.
Yeah.
So it's also, I think it's a reflection of the state of the industry at that time. Like, I'm sure the graphic design industry is much better now and you can do cooler projects, but I didn't really see that opportunity when I came out of college.
So talking about designers and graphic design and digital design, I think my personal opinion is that like titles and roles in designs have kind of gotten out of hand in the last few years.
Yeah.
So in that way, I want to know, like, how do you for yourself define, say, a UI designer or a UX designer or a product designer?
Wow, UI UX.
Sorry, I've had to ask
question.
this, but yeah, I know.
So I feel like a lot of time has passed in the industry. Like obviously when we started, no one was doing UX design, and you started every presentation with the slide saying UX design. What is it? And then you would say UX means user experience, and then you would like explain. Now you don't have to do that anymore, but it's gone the opposite direction where it's almost lost all meaning. And so I think if you go into the semantics of what does a UI designer mean, or what does a UX designer mean, or what does a product designer mean, there's no real difference, in the pure words of it. I think the difference is in the industry and where those kind of titles are placed in companies, right? So let's keep the actual meaning of the word user interface designer or user experience designer or product designer to the side. My perspective is, and I'm sure people would have different views on this, is that usually companies hire UI designers to do like execution, interface level design. User experience designers can usually do higher levels, more strategic work, and they work either with user interface designers or they are also user interface designers. And then product designers try to differentiate themselves from the UX industry because UX now has this consultancy side to it. And it's very hard to explain to someone that I don't do, UX consultancy. I'm practicing something else, and it's very different. And so when you want to tell someone that I don't practice UX in the traditional sense, then you call yourself a product designer. Obviously, these terms don't really mean anything, but like that's what I think people use it as right now. Yeah.
What do you attribute this lack of a shared definition to, if you will, if you had to pick a reason?
It's just a very growing industry. I think it's great. Like, I think, I can only see it as a positive because so many people are joining. There are so many people new to the industry who may not understand or not have like all of this context or, not know what it was like 10 years ago. So people just use the terms like however they want, which is fine, right? So I think as the industry grows, and it's a very new industry as well, we have to be very aware that it's very early days. There is this confusion and this sort of growing, what I would call growing pains. As more and more designers come into the world now, suddenly people are discussing what's the difference between a UX designer and a product designer. But the fact that people are having that discussion is amazing, right? Because earlier the discussion was, oh, why should I pay you? So we are definitely at a better stage now.
For sure.
Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, interesting. And I just wanted to go back to the first question. When you started, when you realized that you want to move from print to web, like at least in your profile, it's written that you went for a official course kind of a thing, right? You wanted to learn it formally. So like,
oh, you mean my master's degree?
Yeah.
Oh, so that happened later, actually. I worked in the industry for a couple of years. I saved up and then I went for my master's degree. So I didn't do it immediately after my graphic design course. So after my undergrad course at NID, I, worked in the industry for a couple of years. And then I think at that time, my younger sister decided to do her master's. And I was like, wow, maybe even I should do one. And so it wasn't so planned as it sounds. Whenever we tell our story, we always want it to make sense. And obviously, when I decided to do my master's, I did want to do it in digital because that's what I was practicing. And I felt like doing it in a university may give me like extra benefits and may help me in my career, because I had already worked in a couple of places as a digital designer, though I don't think I was calling myself that. I think there were some different terms. And so obviously it was natural for me to want to do my master's in interactive media. So that's when I did that. And to be very honest, doing a master's degree abroad helps you for other reasons as well, like visas. And it's just something that you kind of feel like you need to check that box. So I checked the box.
Cool. So yeah, coming to the main topic of like the series is like, can you start by telling when was the first time you hired? What was the experience, or was it tough to find a person? Was it easy? Like any, we can start there.
Okay. I think initially I wasn't very self-aware about hiring. Like when I first started hiring, you kind of get the head count and then you just go ahead and do the interviews and you follow what the HR says and you follow the process. I think over time, obviously, and experience, you realize that maybe this process isn't the best to hire designers, and then you start changing the process. I don't ever remember feeling that hiring was difficult. At the time that we were hiring, it was a very exciting time. The iPhone was out. We were designing apps for the iPhone. A lot of people were very excited to join our team, and what we were looking for were people who were truly interested and truly excited. I remember interviewing someone who was like, I've designed an app in my free time, and it was like in the app store, and we were like, this person is amazing, let's hire them immediately. So I wouldn't say we didn't follow proper process. I don't think we knew what a proper process was for hiring a designer. We just were like, okay, this person seems really interested, they have the talent, they have the potential, let's bring them on board. And that's how I started hiring. Obviously over the years, as you gain experience, then you start thinking about teams and team structure and who's the right person to like be a good value add for this kind of team versus some other team that you also have in your org. And you start looking at like leaders and who is a potential leader and stuff like that. But at that initially, when you start hiring, at least for me, I wasn't thinking of that at all. I was just like, okay, they're a really good designer, let's hire them.
Yeah, and you were at SourceBits in that time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, some amazing work came out of that period, and especially that company. I have to give them a call out. Right? Like I remember one of the first apps was Nightstand, right? Yeah,
it was an amazing team. Everyone was like insanely talented. So it was just a great place to learn. And yeah, it just feels very natural now. But when I look back, I think that was like the most amazing team I've ever been in my whole life. And it's just not possible to find that again. One of the people in our team actually, I think, went ahead and founded Sketch. And yeah, it's just crazy amounts of talent. Of course, we were doing UX in a very sort of traditional way at that time, and we were using OmniGraffle.
Yeah. It was an all Mac world, right? And SourceBits especially was very deep into Mac and iOS tech.
Yeah. It was super fun. I think obviously a very different time, but super fun, a lot of amazing projects. And I think that's the first time I started working with actual products as well, like product founders, and founders would hire us to make apps. And it was very exciting because you could like actually discuss with the founder. So is this really what you want to do? Like, what are your goals? And so design was more strategic and it was like less executional, and that was very interesting as well.
That was like, people now call it the gold rush, but that was a period when so many people suddenly came out and, they found this platform which would let them be entrepreneurs, right? And the insane level of productivity, like the sheer amount of apps.
Oh my God, yeah. There's TwitPic as well. it's just so much stuff came out at that time, and we churned out insane numbers of apps as well. Like I think in a year it was like 100 apps easily.
Wow.
So we were like, I think as a team, it was almost like a factory in some way. They're just like churning out apps, and obviously some of them are good. You know, when you're doing that kind of level of productivity, yeah.
Cool. So I wanted to get back into the first part of the thing that you said. Talk a little bit more about the process, right? So obviously, like from those days, like the process must have been a bit fast as well, as you said. How has the process changed between then and now? And could you give us like an overview of what does your hiring process look like now?
Oh, right now, very different. So I think hiring is different in different companies. So I've done very different hiring processes in different companies. My approach today is, you need to understand the company culture, the budget, where you're at, and then you're more planned. In Shopify, we also have what I really like, which is a double blind hiring process, which means that if there are 5 people in the interview panel, out of which one of them is the hiring manager, no one can see each other's feedback. Nice. So everyone submits their feedback and puts the rating of like yes, no, maybe, strong, yes, strong, no, whatever. And there's a really nice feedback process, and no one can see each other's feedback. So there's lesser bias. And even me as a hiring manager, I can't see anyone's feedback until I've submitted my own. And I feel like that's really fair, because then at the end of the process, everyone can see what we all submitted, and then we have a discussion on, and which what we call a recap, where we discuss the candidate and we give them a fair chance. So I think that's very interesting.
Yep.
I think otherwise it's pretty much the same. Like, you do a portfolio review, you talk to the candidate, you ask them questions. Depending on their seniority, there's one round which is about like their leadership or their behavioral aspects, and then there's like the craft rounds, like portfolio, and then like a whiteboarding exercise. I personally hate take-home exercises, so wherever I go, I try to delete it from the system. Luckily at Shopify, we have a whiteboarding exercise, which is great, and it's not a take-home. At Referral Candy, we also started to do like a on-site whiteboarding or collaborative design exercise. So
I
that's
totally
great.
feel the hate for take-home assignments. I never finish my stuff on deadlines, and when you have to make an impression, that's really hard. I would prefer you call me to your office for 2 days if you need. And
seriously, yeah, and I've done design tests like even not last year, but maybe 2 years ago, and it's always so hard. And I've been a designer for so long, and I still find it so challenging and a real pain. And when you do the design test, what often happens is that the people who are reviewing it have their own standards, right? And they will never tell you what the standards are, or they don't do it on purpose, but they haven't thought through it, or they haven't had a discussion what their standards are. So you could do anything, and it, even if your solution is good, you could fail. And so what my current view is that when you do a design test, you should just try to impress the team. Like, don't try to do an actual don't actually try to do some sort of in-depth actual exercise. Like, just do some sexy designs and just put it there and make sure everything looks good. So that's my current learning on design tests.
I just remembered in ClearTrip we had both the tests. So take home also was there, and like a whiteboard exercise.
Wow.
But I think and the whiteboard exercise was hardly like 15-20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
That's small. Like, it was not like an elaborate thing. But over the years, I've figured out that the take home was not required. For us, the 15-minute is good enough, because we just throw like the simplest problem on earth. And these days with the new talent coming in, they have like a lot of energetic ideas and like dynamic worldviews and whatnot. And I asked to like make like a simple alarm clock,
Yeah.
or like how would like a analog watch work, right? Very, very simple.
But
And
those are
and to,
the best questions to ask because you're testing like the
yeah,
basics. Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes like I've seen, like even if they themselves say that the clock is simple, it's quite dumb, does it have accelerometer? Well, यार dumb रख, simple रख दे. So
Wow.
it's, yeah, it's quite fun. And best is I don't have an answer for this also, so it's just
Yeah,
jamming. There's
it
no
is.
I have, yeah.
I really like in whiteboarding exercise, I like to see the kind of questions they ask because, we once had a candidate, I think in Referral Candy, we asked them to design a time machine or something. And there were some random constraints, like you can go forward or backward in time. And now, I mean, it's very similar to the
Sure.
alarm clock, but a little difficult because you could tie yourself in knots, like in the whole time machine scenario. It's very interesting to see how people think, like, because one person was like, so are there users I can talk to? And so people come up with their own questions during the exercise, which I enjoy. And I think it's always fun to see how somebody think and how do they like approach the problem. And I also like to see people who like actually sit down and think about it for 3 minutes and then start whiteboarding, versus there are some people who just like start. So I mean, both is fine, like nothing is a wrong approach, but it's always good, you get to know more about the person, I think, that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Kedar, I think we've skipped a step. So we're already talking about case studies and whatnot, but we have to stop for a bit on the portfolio, because I think that's where most of the candidates get screened in most companies' pipelines. So Aditi, what are some of the positive and negative signals of applicants, like, that make you say yeah or nah to portfolios?
Yeah, and especially when you said like make something sexy which will impress. Now, like you have all the more required to answer this, please.
Yeah, I think after seeing a lot of portfolios, my experience is that most portfolios are very good nowadays. Like everyone has learned how to put their UI in cool looking devices and put it on a big white background and make it look cool. But I think that now that's a requirement. You have to do that. And so if I see a portfolio who doesn't do that, I'm like, why didn't you do this basic task where you can get templates and do it in 5 minutes, right? Like, so it doesn't require time anymore to make your screen look good in a device. So I do judge on like visual kind of finishing of your portfolio. But then I also judge on like how they communicated their story and their work. Not so much on like how cool the project was or whether it was some branded project. I really don't care. It's more about how do they talk about the work and how do they present the work. And one thing that I've seen is that some designers put like lots of text, or they put like lots of information about the process, like, oh, I did card sorting, or oh, I did wireframes. Like, okay, cool, but like, what is it about this project that you want to present, right? Like, what was the impact, what was the outcome? So I do want to know, how did this design actually result in something, or is the result the design? so I think it's about just testing like the level of the designer. Of course, it's different if you're hiring a junior designer and then you're just looking for potential, like you're just looking for raw talent and you're just like, oh my god, this person seems to have a really good raw talent. And then usually I think I need to speak to the person for at least 30 minutes to like gauge their potential. But especially if I'm hiring like a mid-level or senior designer, how you arrange your portfolio is a sign of your design skills. Like, what was the first page, second page? Like, have you thought about the other person who's going to read through your portfolio?
The user of the portfolio.
Yeah. And I think it is unfair though. Like, I do see some like very good designers who may not have the time to create a polished portfolio, right? But I think if you are that person, then you should just say it. You should just say, hey, this is not the finished one. If you want to finish one, let me know, and then we can give you the opportunity to send it. Yeah. So I know it's not fair to expect a certain level, but that's the industry now. And I don't even think I can meet that standard anymore. Like, I don't have that level of visual design skill that is required today to become a senior designer.
That's very interesting. And I think designers not finishing their portfolio is a meme subgenre in itself. Right? So that's very true.
It's okay. I mean, you only need 2 to 3 projects is my view. That's all I look at. Like, I'm not going to look at more than that. I just look at 2 or 3 projects and that's it. And it also depends, are you sending the portfolio to a recruiter? Then that's a disaster, right? There are some recruiters who go through portfolio and make decisions. I mean, they don't know anything. So they should never make any decision of like design skills. So obviously make sure your portfolio is going to the right person, is being seen by the right person. And it's okay. I mean, designers are always going to keep improving the portfolio forever. I do also judge if a designer has a website or not.
That makes a difference.
Yeah, and whether it's built on Wix or Squarespace, that also
it's okay.
Matters.
It's okay, whatever. I don't
No,
care.
it depends on the number of years of experience, and that was my next question actually, because few years ago I tried at Google and I went through the first round, but the second round was quite surprising for me because I already had 12 years of experience, and the questions were more towards what do you think of the icons. And what do you think? And we were talking about Google Maps. And at certain point, I had to just dismiss, not very abruptly, but just tell them that it's about problem solving. And I think that visual polish, I think I've passed that phase. Yes, I can do it still, but my kicks are maybe I'm applying for a different position altogether. So keeping this background, are there any processes in Shopify to judge or to evaluate like a senior designer?
So I think nowadays visual design is a requirement. I think even in Shopify, that's why I was shocked when I passed the interview phase. I was like, oh my God, are you sure? Because I actually failed Facebook, and I think I failed Facebook at the 6th round, and my feedback was that my visual design skills were not good enough. I was like, okay, I agree. I take that feedback. So I think today in product design, you are expected to be what I would say full stack, which is really good visual design, really good strategic thinking, very good leadership, and UX, and everything else you can think of, good presentation skills, blah, blah, blah. And I think what you need to do is kind of like how you frame your portfolio and your narrative to the best of your ability so that you can cover your weaknesses as much as you can and then go through. But even at Shopify, that expectation is there. There are content designers. So we have content designers and they can be very senior and they are kind of like olden days UX designers. Like they do IA, they do a lot of design projects. There are projects which have only content designer and no product designer, right? Because there's no real UI that needs to be done. There's no real visual stuff that needs to be done either. It's more like rearranging what already is there in a way that users can understand and doing a lot of strategic work as well. So we have content designers and we have researchers who can contribute strategically to design and be active in the UX process. But product designers have to be kind of full stack.
Understand.
It's harsh. It's harsh. Like I feel like, the industry standards are just going up and up. Yeah.
Before we jump next, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show.
So I would like to shift gears a bit and move to an article which I was reading, which you had written. I think when you were in Referral Candy, that it's okay to switch jobs if you're not comfortable.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just dig further on that. Would like to hear your thoughts around it, because a lot of times it happens that when we see, at least when I see people hopping jobs, I sometimes suspect stability, right?
Yeah.
So it would be great to hear the other side. That what is your thought process behind it?
Yeah, I'm a bit extreme in my viewpoint. I would say I'm very almost mercenary in that if you don't pay me how much I want, I will leave the company. This is really politically incorrect, I
No,
guess.
not at
but
all.
in my 20s, especially, I was just very, very focused. And I really was quite mercenary. And I was just like, this is what I want to do. And I changed as many jobs as possible to get where I wanted to get. I don't think that you should be loyal to your company after a certain point, right? Like you should learn whatever you want to learn and then move on. And if it's not working out, then move on, right? And I have seen a lot of designers, and I encourage people to do that as well. Like, when people talk to me, I'm like, if you're frustrated, why don't you look for other opportunities, right? Or it could be the other way around as well. If you think you deserve a promotion, why don't you go out there and see who is going to pay you this amount that you think you deserve? And if you can get it, go get it, right? So maybe it's a bit mercenary, but I also see it from the perspective of learning, which is I wanted to work in design studios, I wanted to work in consultancies, then I wanted to work in startups. And then after that, I was like, okay, I've done a few startups now. I want to try a bigger company. So I'm just like trying different things. And that's just my approach. It may not be the best approach for other people, right? Like I wouldn't say, oh, everyone should do this. Like it's not fun. Changing companies a lot is not fun. And there are always people who are like, oh, why are you changing? And I don't have any opinions on people who change a lot, but I do ask, like, what happened, and did anything happen, like what made you leave? If you want to share, like if you don't want to share, that's fine. And also I speak to a lot of junior designers in the industry, and I'm very aware of how many toxic team cultures exist out there, and there's really no point staying and trying to make it work. I mean, you don't have much power to change things at like a designer level of an entire org. Like, just go find another org that's better for you, right? So that's kind of how I see it. I don't know whether that's a very extreme perspective, but that's just how I've managed it. And I also think that some people have this notion that your career is a ladder, and you're just supposed to go from junior designer to mid-level designer to senior designer. Then you, I don't know, become, creative director, or like then you become head of design. Then it's like finished, or like I don't know what people are imagining. But I actually think your career is kind of like a jungle gym where you're just like doing various shit, and you're just like, what is all this? And in hindsight, you put it together in a story and you say, hey, I did this and this and this. And it makes sense in hindsight, but when you're in it, it may not make sense, right? People need to be free to do whatever they want, and they shouldn't feel like, oh, I have to like get promoted. I can't move laterally to another role. Like, what if there's a designer who actually wants to become a researcher? Let them go and do that, right?
Thanks for saying that. That needed to be said, especially the bit about careers. Like it's never a straight path. And I think I will also say this is a side effect of the industry being young, right? That we don't have insight. A lot of people who've had 30-year, 40-year careers, which is what an actual career looks like. So wherever we look at, we see these straight lines, right? So I think, thanks for saying that again.
No worries.
In fact, I have this question for a couple of illustrators in past episodes I'd asked, like, what does a 40-year-old illustrator do?
Wow.
Like, does he or she still illustrate, or like they have to move to a creative director, an art director role? So so it's interesting to that perspective. In if you fit in product design, it also makes sense here. So we have this at least in India, I don't know much about the other parts of the world, but at least in India, you see a lot of designers positioning themselves, or then trying, like every designer with 5 years experience has a mentor word next to it in LinkedIn, right?
That's so
And
awesome.
yeah, and I think it is because of a need to, because they've joined somewhere and they want to hire people.
Yeah.
They want to build a team. So it's quite obvious that you write these heavy words around it, right? So what is your take on being like a brand yourself?
Are you?
To No, and the reason I'm asking is because this connects to the stability part, right? So if you're just moving from one company, you're not. So there's a flip side to it also, right?
Yeah.
Where you have not gone deep enough into the problem of the company, or for like problem of the user, and then made some value add through design, and then I don't know, you can completely dismiss this question, but this is the other side which I'm coming from, and then you automatically become a brand. So I look up to, say, Abhinit, who's been struggling and trying to do something in Indonesia, or Srinath, who's trying to do in the food tech space, right?
Yeah.
And these becomes automatically, if you see good product, they are automatically brands themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I
any thoughts
agree.
on that?
I think stability is important, and I think if you're a leader, it's different. And you have to be responsible and you have to care about the stability of the team and how it grows. However, if you are just a designer on the team, it's okay to keep changing jobs. I mean, I don't think anyone should feel guilty and feel like them leaving the team is going to make the team unstable.
Mhm.
Like, you are replaceable, right?
Yeah.
Even as a leader, you are replaceable. At least that's what I think. And so I think sometimes we may overvalue that to some degree. I do agree that if you stay longer in a company, you can do more, you can build more bridges, you can gain more trust and do more things. So the longer you stay, the more you can do, right? And that's awesome, right? And I think I totally see the value of that for sure. So if you're having fun in the company, you should definitely stay and you should definitely do um, as much as you can. Sorry, I forgot the other part of the question. I only answered the stability part.
No, so you become brand
Oh, the
yourself, and
brand
that's
thing.
why, yeah. And I'm not really like harping on the brand aspect of it, but generally you are stable enough. And this is coming from my most recent interview. One of the candidates I was interviewing, he asked me, either you are like whatever VP at or EVP at Book My Show, and you left in 2 years. Can you
Okay.
tell me why? And I was
Are
like,
you?
yeah, and I was like, yeah, good one. So I explained him, but like there are designers who are also trusting or judging which leader they are reporting to or which team they are getting into, right? That perspective.
I think if I find it hard to believe that people judge people based on how long they've been in a company. Like, I've definitely built, at least in my view, a good network of people that I really trust in the design community, and they're all very aware of like stuff that I do and that I can do random stuff. But I always like explain myself when I say, I got excited about this other opportunity and so I did it. Like, I think it depends how you leave, and it depends, especially if you're in a leadership position, does your team still love you when you leave or like at least they can tolerate you? I don't know. And so I think it's about people, like building that connection with people so they know what you are about. I think being authentic is important, and how I don't really see myself or want to be any kind of brand. That puts a lot of pressure, I think, on a person as well. Like, because then you have to do this like social media presence, and I really respect people who do that. Like, I'm like, wow, you have all this energy and time to do it. I'm too tired at the end of the week to do all of this stuff. But I think if you're authentic and you always say the kind of things that you say, then you get an automatic following in a way. Like, people will come to you when they want a particular kind of thing. Like, for me, for example, people have heard me being very outspoken. And so a lot of people come to me to ask me, hey, have you heard anything about this company or that company? What do you think? of this. And they know I'm going to tell them what I know, and I'm not just going to be super diplomatic. So, and I don't know if that's a brand, but at least that's my sort of authentic voice, right? And people come to me and say, tell me about my portfolio. And I'm like, it's going to be harsh. Are you sure you want to do this? So, and they're like, yes, let's do this, right? And so as long as you know what kind of agenda, almost like an agenda, like what is your one-liner that you want to tell the design community, I think that's fine. I wouldn't want my brand to be connected with my employer, if that makes sense. Like I want to be my own individual, and my employer is awesome. Shopify is an amazing company, but I'm my own person as well. So that's kind of how I see it. If I do build a brand, it would not be connected to which company I work at, or like just like design, right? Like
makes a lot of sense actually, because I also get this question, Kedar, sometimes, right? Like, and I encourage people to build their brands, but I almost always tell them this: remember what your brand is selling also, because a brand without a product behind it is kind of pointless, right? So when you build a personal brand, you're kind of looking for that next gig, for that next challenge. You're putting yourself out there so that you could network better, right? So people do it for various reasons, but be sure of why, right? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you putting in this much time? And
and like, are you out there because you're saying, oh, I'm a very cool designer who's worked in the industry for 20 years? Okay, but there should be something else, that you want to say, and which will make somebody interested in joining your team. Because in the end, it is about that, right? Like the kind of things that I talk about, I hope that people feel like, oh, okay, if I join a company, then they know that it's going to be, not biased, not toxic, that I wouldn't tolerate those things. And there's a sort of guarantee that comes with that. So I think that's valuable. And then somebody else may have something else that is valuable to them. And then they're like, getting their own network of people out of that.
Makes sense. I want to pick on that. Next thing I want to ask is just picking on that, you've mentioned it a couple of times now, right? Like there are a lot of places out there who have a very toxic environment. You've said that designers should not hesitate at all, right, to leave those or feel guilty about it. But what are some of the things you picked up over the years which, ensure that your team or, the place that where you're going, it doesn't end up becoming a toxic environment, right? One of the things that people have been talking about a lot is how, the teams that you build should be diverse, right? And I think especially important for design, having multiple perspectives there. Any thoughts on that? These two things, like how do you avoid toxicity? And second is like, does building a diverse environment help counter that to some extent?
I think it's two different things. You can have a toxic culture anyway. It doesn't automatically solve all your problems. I would actually frame it slightly differently. Like I would say that there are normal teams and then there are not diverse teams. And it takes a lot of effort to have a team that's not diverse. That's my view. It's a system, it could be happening unintentionally, but in today's day and age, it's really hard to make excuses. I think that's my view. It's a solved problem, and as well, like lots of people have normal teams and they have no problem having a non-diverse team. So if you have a non-diverse team, you need to think about what happened and why is your org or your company creating this situation and how to solve it. And again, this has all been solved. There are lots of examples out there of like processes to follow. In terms of toxic, I think, we shouldn't blame ourselves for being in a toxic team if that has happened to someone. I've heard so many stories. In my view, in the stories that I've heard from startup land, right now I'm far away from startup land because I'm in a huge Oracle, Shopify, and everything is awesome. And we actually have a 4-day week from next month,
Awesome. That
by the
sounds
way.
awesome.
So yeah, I'm like in the opposite of a toxic environment. But what I've heard a lot is it does come from founders. The founders do create a certain culture or tone of voice that trickles down. And when it trickles down, it sometimes gets exaggerated. And then, it creates a company culture which could be toxic, or it could be some other leader that is creating the toxic culture. It's never just some guy creating the toxic. It's always somebody very senior, and it's happening. Okay, so thinking that you can suddenly change that through your own actions is quite a lot of hubris. And I mean, you can go for it, if you want. I would say, wow, like I think some people are, very young and very energetic. I don't have the energy for this. So I would just say, bring it up with the team, like discuss it in your retros. But if it's not changing and if it's making you a wreck, and if you're working on the weekends, then you should look at other places, because you can do a lot of good work without being in a toxic culture. So also, I think in terms of what is toxic, sometimes maybe people use that word too easily. So I would like to define that a little bit, if that's okay. Like, I think toxic would be, people are making you work through the weekend, people are shouting and screaming in the office, people are being really mean, there are weird things, like really toxic. That's when I say toxic, I mean toxic. Right? Like, there is nobody in the company who has children, because if you have children, you can't work there because the work hours are so crazy, right? That's all sign that you're working in a not so great company.
Yeah, I think that helps. I do think that, words get thrown around a bit loosely, and then they start, to kind of lose their meaning. So thanks for defining it.
Yeah.
Even I was going to ask, because every designer or every person will have a different threshold to define.
Yeah, definitely.
Sometimes,
I mean, I think, maybe my definitions may be also a bit old school, which is like, obviously, like I was working, I don't think I should say this, but there was, I've seen people like throw things in the office, not in any actual company that I work at, but as a freelancer. Obviously, this is not okay, and this is toxic. Shouting is also bad. And overwork, I think, is the most common thing that I've seen. Like, just putting a lot of pressure on your team, expecting people to work 16 hours a day. I used to think it's normal.
I used to think it's normal as well. And I think those 100 apps a year days couldn't have happened without 16-hour days.
To be very fair, I was having fun and I thought it was normal. Then I came to Singapore. Actually, I was still working 16-hour days like throughout my career. And then I came to Singapore and I had my first boss, Dinesh, who's the founder of Referral Candy. And he looked at me and he's like, go home. I was like, what? It's 6 p.m. He's like, go home. And he taught me that if you work long hours, your team will be impacted and they may feel like they have to do the same thing. And I was like, I don't expect them to do that. But he was like, that's what they expect. So you need to be a good role model and you need to finish your work on time and then go home. So I was like, this Singapore is a very interesting place. So I definitely learned a lot of things here. And I think it was very interesting to me to find out that you can finish your work in 8 hours and be as productive as before. You don't lose productivity.
That's a very hard thing to come to terms with. At least for me, it was really hard, right? Like when I switched gears, and then because you look back and you were like, okay, I was wasting a lot of time back then, right?
Technically, yes. You're doing chai breaks, smoke breaks, whatever.
Because
whatever
it doesn't matter. You're going back home at 11 p.m. at 1 a.m. So time kind of becomes flexible. Makes sense.
In fact, I had thought of taking like a TCS kind of job when I'll turn 35.
Wow.
was my dream when I was 28, 25, when I was just slogging in like advertising agency and just getting hang around product design and like everything. And I said 35. And the irony is I'm 38 and I've just joined a startup.
Oh,
So
wow. Enjoy.
yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Awesome.
Cool.
So there's one thing I picked, Aditi, in your answers. At one point, you were talking about how, the bar is getting higher in the industry. You need to know this and that and everything. And at the same time, you mentioned for one of the questions that hiring has not been a challenge, right? So I was just wondering, like, have you been
Oh.
exceptionally lucky with finding these people who are, you know,
I think that's a great question. I think initially when I started hiring, it didn't feel challenging. Obviously now when I'm trying to do hiring the right way and I'm trying to interview people remotely across various countries and building teams and finding the right people for the right teams, now it is obviously very, very challenging. But initially, when I didn't know what I was doing and I was not self aware, it felt easy because you're just hiring like people with a lot of talent. I think today it's definitely very hard. There's a lot of competition as well. Maybe that's why it's also much harder right now. Like there's always another company with a better offer or, so there's always going to be that challenge as well.
Kedar, over to you.
Yeah, I would like to conclude with one last question, which was you have worked in like a technical or whatever, like a geeky kind of a product, which was Postman.
Yeah.
And you've done some like amazing job with it and like a API based company. So
Thank you.
any comments you want to give to young designers who are starting fresh on the lines of obviously design is about solving problems. It's not like because we are again looking at a trend of people not people wanting to work in the B2C space and like not working on SaaS products or other places. So any first of all, if you have seen that pattern, I know you're on the other spectrum in Singapore, but yeah, you must have seen some pattern there as well. And any thoughts around?
Yeah. I've definitely seen that. Like, I think as there are more and more opportunities, designers are looking for what I call the next shiny object. They're like, oh, this company got $3 billion in funding, so I'm going to join them. And I always say, okay, cool. But what about what you want to do, right? Like, are you just looking for that star, to stick on your fridge or I don't know what? But instead, you should look for the exciting design work that you want to do and then do that. And also, because I mean, my Postman opportunity was so random. Like, I met these folks and I was like, this is so interesting. This is so challenging. I really want to do the work. I would have never known that it got famous and, it went off. And so I think I would tell designers, look for the thing that you want to do. Don't just join what you think is a cool company, because today companies crash and burn, right? Faster than ever. So look for something that you think is truly genuine and interesting and solving a real problem. And that's the way, to become a better designer.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Aditi. It was really fun talking to you. A lot of different perspectives and a lot of food for thought in general to think on for designers especially.
Sure. Happy to chat with both of you.
Yeah.
It was a good conversation.
Thank you for people also to listening till the end. Currently, I'm heading the design at Jupiter.money and we are hiring at all levels. So you can visit jupiter.money/careers and follow Audiogyan on Instagram at Audiogyan Moments or visit audiogyan.com for more GAN sessions. You guys want to plug anything? Shopify is hiring, Gojek is hiring.
Yeah, we are definitely hiring. Shopify is hiring senior designers and content designers.
Okay.
And Gojek also hires from time to time. If you want to know about the job openings, you can follow us on Twitter at Gojek Design. And yeah, we'll post all the updates there.
Awesome. Chalo, thank you guys. Thank you. It was fun talking to you. And thank you, Aditi, for I know you have, it's like quite out of your schedule time.
Yes,
and
it's midnight.
Thanks for joining.
Oh yeah, you're in Singapore. Yeah.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to check our other interesting podcast on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. To stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at IVM Podcast. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at Audiogyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.